Subscribe to Storylab for more stories. Now, let's begin this one. Chapter 1. The Search Never Ends. Martin Kane stood at his office window on the 32nd floor, watching the Seattle rain streak down the glass like tears he'd stopped shedding years ago. 10 years. 10 years since his 8-year-old son Josh had vanished from their backyard during a family barbecue. 10 years of private investigators, false leads, and sleepless nights. 10 years of watching his marriage to Shelby slowly crumble under the weight of grief and unanswered questions. At 45, Martin had built Kane Construction from nothing into a multi-million-dollar empire. His calloused hands and sharp mind had carved out a fortune from concrete and steel, but all the money in the world couldn't buy back his son. The company provided a distraction, a way to channel his rage into something productive. His employees knew better than to cross him. Martin Kane was notorious for his zero-tolerance policy. Cross him once, and you're gone forever. No second chances, no mercy. Mr. Kane, his assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. Detective Morrison is here to see you. Martin's jaw tightened. Detective Morrison had been the lead investigator on Josh's case for the past 3 years, after the original detective retired. Morrison was young, ambitious, and actually seemed to care, unlike the burned-out cops who'd handled the case initially. Send him in. Detective Curtis Morrison entered, his usually composed demeanor showing cracks of barely contained excitement. In his early 30s, with sharp eyes and a permanent 5 o'clock shadow, Morrison had earned Martin's grudging respect through his dogged persistence. "Martin, you need to sit down," Morrison said, his voice tight with emotion. "I don't need to sit down. Just tell me. We found him. We found Josh." The words hit Martin like a physical blow. He gripped the edge of his desk, his knuckles white. "Where?" "Portland. He's been living with a foster family there for the past 5 years. Before that." Morrison paused, consulting his notes. "The details are complicated. He was found wandering the streets. No memory of who he was or where he came from. Severe trauma, the doctors said. But he's alive, Martin. He's 18 now, and he's alive." Martin closed his eyes, feeling something crack open inside his chest. A dam that had held back 10 years of suppressed hope. "How did you find him?" "DNA matched through the national database. He got arrested for a minor altercation last week. Nothing serious, just a bar fight, and they ran his prints. The system flagged him as a missing person." "Where is he now?" "Still in Portland. The foster family, the Pattons, they're good people. Luke and Grace Patton. They've been taking care of him, got him through high school." "But Martin..." Morrison's voice grew serious. "He doesn't remember much about his life before. The trauma wiped out most of his early memories." Martin turned back to the window, his reflection ghost-like in the glass. "I want to see him. I figured you would. I can arrange transport, but Martin, you should know that Josh might not remember you. Or your wife. The doctors say it's possible the memories could return, but there's no guarantee." "It doesn't matter," Martin said quietly. "He's my son." After Morrison left, Martin sat alone in his office, staring at the photo on his desk, the last picture taken of Josh before he disappeared. A gap-toothed smile, bright blue eyes, sandy hair that never stayed combed. Now that boy was a man, and Martin had missed it all. He picked up his phone and dialed his wife's number. Shelby answered on the third ring, her voice distant and distracted as it had been for years. "Martin? What is it?" "I'm at book club. They found Josh." Silence stretched between them, broken only by the sound of Shelby's sharp intake of breath. When she spoke again, her voice was different, smaller, younger, like the woman he'd married 15 years ago. "What did you say?" "Josh. They found him. He's alive, Shelby. He's in Portland." The sound that came through the phone might have been a sob or a gasp. Oh my God, Martin. Are you sure?" "DNA confirmed it. I'm flying out tomorrow to bring him home." "I'm coming with you." "No." The word came out harder than he'd intended. "Let me go first. Ease him into this. If he doesn't remember us." "Martin, he's my son too." "I know, but let me handle this. I'll call you as soon as I know more." After hanging up, Martin stared at Josh's photo again. In 10 years, his son had become a stranger. But blood was blood, and Martin Kane protected his own. No matter what it took, no matter who had to pay, he would rebuild what had been stolen from him. He had no idea that the real nightmare was just beginning. Chapter 2. The Reunion. The Portland airport was crowded with the usual mix of business travelers and tourists, but Martin barely noticed them as he followed Detective Morrison through the terminal. His hands shook slightly, not from fear, but from the adrenaline that had been coursing through his system since Morrison's call. After 18 hours of travel and sleepless anticipation, he was finally going to see his son. "The Pattons are good people," Morrison said as they climbed into the rental car. They took Josh in when he was 13, after he'd been through 3 other foster homes. Kid was troubled, angry, but they stuck with him. Got him counseling, helped him graduate high school. What kind of trouble? Nightmares, panic attacks, violent outbursts. Classic signs of severe trauma. The doctors think something terrible happened to him before he was found, but without his memories. Martin's jaw clenched. Someone had hurt his son, and that someone was still out there. As he asked about his real family, some, but the memories are fragmented. He gets flashes sometimes, a woman's voice, the smell of barbecue smoke, a man's laugh. Nothing concrete enough to piece together. The Patton house was a modest 2-story in a quiet suburban neighborhood. Luke Patton met them at the door, a man in his 50s with kind eyes and calloused hands that spoke of honest work. His wife Grace stood beside him, a woman with graying hair and the patient demeanor of someone used to dealing with damaged children. "Mr. Kane," Luke said, extending his hand. "I can't imagine what these years have been like for you." "Where is he?" "In the backyard." "He's nervous." This is a lot for him to process. Grace's voice was gentle but firm. "You need to understand, Mr. Kane, Josh doesn't remember being your son. To him, we're his family. This is going to be difficult for everyone." Martin nodded, though every instinct screamed at him to push past them and find Josh. Through the kitchen window, he could see a young man sitting on a picnic table, his back to the house. Even from behind, Martin could see the resemblance, the set of his shoulders, the way he held his head. His son, Josh. Grace called softly as they stepped onto the back porch. "There's someone here to see you." The young man turned, and Martin's breath caught in his throat. This was Josh, but not the Josh of his memories. Gone was the gap-toothed 8-year-old. In his place sat a man with his father's strong jaw and his mother's green eyes, but there was something else there too, a wariness, a tension that spoke of hard-earned survival instincts. "Josh," Martin said, his voice rougher than he'd intended. "I'm Martin Kane. I'm your father." Josh studied him with unsettling intensity, his green eyes moving from Martin's face to his hands to his posture, as if cataloging potential threats. "Detective Morrison told me. You're the one who's been looking for me. Every day for 10 years. Something flickered across Josh's face, not recognition, but perhaps the ghost of a memory. "I don't remember you. That's okay. We have time." They talked for an hour on the Pattons' back porch, Martin carefully sharing memories of Josh's childhood, while his son listened with the polite attention of a stranger. Josh asked few questions, but his eyes never stopped moving, never stopped watching. There was something almost predatory about his alertness, and Martin wondered what his son had endured to develop such instincts. "I'd like you to come home with me," Martin finally said. "To Seattle. I know it's a lot to ask, but I'll come." The quick agreement surprised everyone, including the Pattons. "Josh, you don't have to decide right now," Grace said gently. "No, I want to." Josh's voice was firm. "I need to see where I came from. Maybe it'll help me remember." Luke and Grace exchanged worried looks, but they didn't argue. They'd raised enough foster children to know when one had made up his mind. The flight to Seattle was quiet. Josh stared out the window, occasionally asking questions about the city or the house they were going to. Martin found himself studying his son's profile, looking for traces of the boy he'd lost. They were there, but buried under years of experiences Martin could only guess at. "Mom's going to be excited to see you," Martin said as they began their descent. "Mom." Josh tested the word like it was foreign. "Shelby, right?" Detective Morrison showed me pictures. "That's right. Shelby Kane. She's been waiting for this day as long as I have." Josh nodded, but said nothing. Something in his expression had shifted, become more guarded. Martin attributed it to nerves. The Kane house sat on 5 acres of wooded property in an exclusive suburb north of Seattle. Martin had bought it when Josh was 6, wanting his son to have room to run and explore. Now, as they pulled up the circular driveway, it felt like a mausoleum, too big, too empty, too full of ghosts. Shelby was waiting on the front porch, and Martin felt a familiar ache at the sight of her. At 42, she was still beautiful, her auburn hair carefully styled, her figure maintained through expensive personal trainers and yoga classes. But the years had carved lines around her eyes, and her smile seemed brittle as glass. "Josh," she whispered, stepping down from the porch. Josh climbed out of the car slowly, his body language immediately changing. Martin had seen deer react the same way when they caught a predator's scent. Every muscle coiled and ready to run. "Hello," Josh said, his voice carefully neutral. Shelby moved toward him with arms outstretched, but stopped when Josh took an involuntary step backward. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I know this is overwhelming. God, look at you. You're so tall. You look just like your father." Josh's eyes never left her face, and Martin noticed his hands had clenched into fists. "I don't remember you." "That's okay, sweetheart. We'll make new memories." They went inside, Shelby chattering nervously about Josh's old room, which she kept exactly as he'd left it. Josh followed silently, his gaze moving constantly, mapping exits and potential weapons with the efficiency of someone who'd learned to survive in dangerous places. "Are you hungry?" Shelby asked as they stood in the kitchen. "I can make your favorite, grilled cheese and tomato soup. You used to love." "No." The word came out sharp, almost violent. Josh's face had gone pale, his breathing shallow. "I need some air." He walked quickly toward the back door, and Martin followed, concerned. Outside, Josh leaned against the deck railing, his knuckles white as he gripped the wood. "You okay?" "Yeah, it's a lot." Josh's voice was strained. "This place, it feels familiar but wrong somehow, like a house from a nightmare." Martin felt a chill run down his spine. "What do you mean?" "I don't know." Flashes. A woman screaming. The smell of something burning. Josh shook his head. "The doctor said I might get fragments like this. Most of them don't mean anything." But as Martin watched his son struggle with memories that might or might not be real, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. Josh's reaction to Shelby had been immediate and visceral, the response of prey recognizing a predator. Inside the house, Shelby stood at the kitchen window, watching them through the glass. When she noticed Martin looking, she smiled and waved. But for just a moment, before she'd realized she was being observed, her expression had been something else entirely. Something that looked almost like fear. Chapter 3. The Trigger. That evening, the Kane family sat down to their first dinner together in 10 years. Shelby had prepared Josh's old favorites: barbecued chicken, corn on the cob, mashed potatoes, though Josh picked at his food without much appetite. The conversation was stilted, filled with awkward pauses and careful questions. "Do you remember your room?" Shelby asked, cutting her chicken into precise, small pieces. "I kept all your toys, your books. Everything's exactly the same." Josh glanced up from his untouched plate. "I looked at it earlier. There's a model airplane on the desk." "You built that with your father when you were 7, Shelby said, her voice softening with memory. "You were so proud of it." "I don't remember building it." Josh's tone was flat, almost challenging. Martin noticed his wife's jaw tighten almost imperceptibly. "Well, maybe you'll remember more as time goes on. The important thing is that you're home now." "Is it?" Josh asked quietly. "Oh, how do I know if this is really where I belong?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Martin set down his fork, studying his son's face. "What do you mean?" What proof do I have that you're really my parents?" "Some DNA test that Detective Morrison showed me? How do I know you didn't just find some kid who looked like your missing son?" Shelby's laugh was too bright, too sharp. "Josh, sweetheart, you're being paranoid. We're your family. We love you." "You love who you think I am," Josh corrected. "But I'm not that 8-year-old boy anymore. I'm a stranger who happens to share some DNA with you." Martin felt a surge of admiration for his son's intelligence, even as his heart ached. Josh was right. They were strangers. But something in the way Josh watched Shelby suggested his wariness went deeper than natural caution. "You're right," Martin said finally. "We don't know who you are now, but we'd like to learn, if you'll let us." Josh studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "I appreciate the honesty." After dinner, Josh excused himself to his room, claiming fatigue from travel. Martin helped Shelby clear the dishes, noting how her hands shook slightly as she scraped plates. "He's different than I expected," she said softly. "He's been through trauma, Shelby. 10 years of God knows what. He's not going to be the same little boy who disappeared. I know that." Her voice carried a sharp edge. "But there's something in the way he looks at me. Like he doesn't trust me. He doesn't trust anyone. Look at how he catalogs every room, every exit. Someone taught him to be afraid." Shelby turned away, busying herself with loading the dishwasher. "Maybe we should have given him more time before bringing him here. Maybe we rushed things." Martin frowned. "Yesterday, you couldn't wait to see him. Now you're having second thoughts." "I'm not having second thoughts. I just think maybe he'd be more comfortable staying with the Pattons for a while longer, until he adjusts. Shelby, he's our son. He belongs here with us." She turned to face him, and for a moment, Martin saw something flicker across her features, something that might have been panic. "Of course he does. I just want what's best for him." Later that night, Martin sat in his study, supposedly reviewing construction contracts, but actually thinking about Josh's homecoming. Something fell off, like a discordant note in a familiar song. Josh's wariness around Shelby seemed too specific, too immediate, and Shelby's sudden reluctance to have Josh home didn't match her earlier desperation to see him. A soft sound from upstairs caught his attention. Footsteps in the hallway. Martin checked his watch. 2:47 a.m. He climbed the stairs quietly, wondering if Josh was having trouble sleeping in an unfamiliar bed. The hallway was dark except for a thin line of light under Josh's door. Martin approached, intending to knock softly and check on his son, but stopped when he heard voices. Josh was on the phone with someone. "I'm telling you it's her. I'd know that voice anywhere." Josh's voice was low but intense. She was there that night. She was part of it. Martin felt his blood turn to ice. He pressed closer to the door, straining to hear. "I don't care if you think I'm paranoid. She's the one who gave me the shot. She's the one who said everything would be okay." Josh's voice cracked slightly. "Luke, I need you to do something for me. I need you to look into her background, see if there's any connection to Portland. Any reason she might have been there 10 years ago." Martin backed away from the door, his mind reeling. Josh was talking to Luke Patton, asking him to investigate Shelby. And he was talking about someone giving him a shot, about someone being part of it. Part of what? Martin made his way back downstairs, his thoughts churning. If Josh's fragmentary memories were accurate, if Shelby had been involved in his disappearance somehow, the implications were staggering. But how was that possible? Shelby had been with him that night. They'd searched for Josh together, called the police together, grieved together. Hadn't they? As Martin tried to remember the details of that night 10 years ago, he realized how hazy they'd become. He remembered the barbecue, remembered Josh playing in the backyard with the neighbor kids. He remembered realizing Josh was missing, remembered the panic. But the specifics, where exactly had Shelby been when Josh disappeared? What had she been doing? Martin spent the rest of the night in his study, staring at the ceiling and trying to piece together memories that suddenly seemed full of holes. When dawn finally came, he had more questions than answers, but one thing was certain. Something was very wrong in his house. At breakfast, Josh appeared calm and rested, showing no signs of his late-night phone call. Shelby seemed nervous, jumping at sudden sounds and spilling her coffee twice. She kept glancing at Josh when she thought he wasn't looking, her expression unreadable. "I was thinking," she said suddenly, "maybe Josh would like to see some of his old friends today. The Morrison boy still lives down the street." "Tommy Morrison?" Josh asked. "Detective Morrison's son?" "That's right. You two used to be inseparable." Josh nodded slowly. "I'd like that. It might help with the memories." But Martin noticed that Josh's eyes never left Shelby's face as she spoke, and his expression was that of a hunter watching prey. Whatever memories were surfacing, they weren't the nostalgic childhood reminiscences Shelby was hoping for. They were something much darker. Chapter 4. Fragments of Truth. Martin arranged to work from home for the next few days, telling himself it was to help Josh adjust. But the truth was, he couldn't shake the feeling that his son was in danger, not from external threats, but from something much closer to home. Josh spent the morning exploring the house and grounds, moving with the careful precision of someone mapping a battlefield. Martin watched from his study window as his son examined every door, every window, every potential escape route. When Josh reached the tool shed behind the garage, he stopped for nearly 10 minutes, staring at the weathered building with an expression of intense concentration. "Remembering something?" Martin asked, stepping outside to join him. Josh startled slightly. Impressive reflexes for someone who'd seemed lost in thought. "Maybe. This place. I think I used to hide here when I was scared." "Scared of what?" "I don't know. Loud voices, maybe. Fighting." Josh's voice was distant, his eyes still fixed on the shed. "There's something else, though. Something about the smell." Martin frowned. The shed smelled like motor oil and old wood. Nothing particularly memorable. But Josh was breathing deeply, as if trying to catch a scent that was no longer there. "Dad." Josh's use of the word was careful, testing. "What kind of marriage do you and Shelby have?" The question was so unexpected that Martin almost didn't answer. "What do you mean?" "I mean, are you happy? Do you fight a lot? Did you fight when I was little?" Martin considered lying, then decided his son deserved honesty. "We used to fight more than we should have, especially after we lost you. Grief changes people. But before, when I was 8, your mother and I had different ideas about a lot of things. Money, discipline, how much freedom to give you." Martin paused. "Why do you ask?" Josh was quiet for a long moment. "I keep having dreams. Fragments, really. A woman yelling, a man's voice trying to calm her down. The sound of something breaking." He turned to face Martin directly. "In the dreams, I'm hiding. Always hiding." Before Martin could respond, Shelby appeared on the back porch, calling them in for lunch. Josh's entire body language changed instantly. Muscles tensing, eyes tracking her movement like a predator evaluating a threat. "Coming, Mom." He called back, but the word Mom sounded forced, unnatural. During lunch, Shelby kept up a stream of cheerful chatter about Josh's childhood, sharing memories and anecdotes that should have been heartwarming. But Martin noticed that many of her stories had a quality of performance to them, as if she was reciting lines from a script. "Remember when you broke Mrs. Chen's window with your baseball?" she asked, laughing. "You were so worried you'd get in trouble." "No," Josh said quietly. "I don't remember that. Or the time you tried to give the neighbor's dog a haircut. You came home covered in fur and looking so guilty." "I don't remember that either." Shelby's smile faltered slightly. "Well, you were very young. Maybe these stories are from before you would have formed clear memories." "How old was I when I broke Mrs. Chen's window?" "Oh, I don't know exactly. 6? 7? Josh's eyes narrowed. Most people remember things from when they're 6 or 7, especially traumatic things like breaking someone's window. The challenge in his voice was unmistakable. Shelby's face flushed, and she looked to Martin for support. But Martin was too busy processing his own doubts. How many of Shelby's cheerful memories were real, and how many were carefully constructed fiction? After lunch, Josh announced he was going for a walk around the neighborhood. "To see if anything looks familiar," he explained. "I'll come with you," Shelby offered quickly. "No." The refusal was sharp, immediate. "I need to do this alone." After Josh left, Martin confronted his wife in the kitchen. "Shelby, we need to talk." She was loading the dishwasher with jerky, agitated movements. "About what?" "About Josh. About his memories. About why he seems afraid of you." "He's not afraid of me. He's just confused, disoriented. It's completely normal for someone who's been through trauma." "Is it normal for him to not remember a single story you've told him? Is it normal for him to flinch every time you reach for him?" Shelby slammed a plate into the dishwasher hard enough to chip it. "What are you suggesting, Martin?" "I'm not suggesting anything. I'm asking, were you involved in Josh's disappearance?" The question hung between them like a live wire. Shelby went very still, her back to him, her hands gripping the edge of the counter. "How can you ask me that?" she whispered. "Because something's not right. Josh's reactions, your nervousness, the gaps in my own memories of that night. Martin stepped closer. Tell me the truth, Shelby. What happened 10 years ago? When she turned to face him, her eyes were bright with tears, but there was something else there too, something that might have been relief. You really don't remember, do you? She said softly. Remember what? The fight we had that night. The things we said to each other. The things you threatened to do. Martin felt the ground shift under his feet. What fight? What did I threaten? You were drinking. You've been drinking a lot back then, after the business started taking off. You said I was a terrible mother, that I didn't deserve Josh. You said you were going to take him away from me, get full custody. I said that. You said if I ever tried to stop you, you'd make sure I never saw him again. You said you had lawyers who could make me disappear. Shelby's voice was steady now, reciting facts. That's why I was so scared when Josh vanished. I thought you'd done something. Taken him somewhere I couldn't find him. Martin stared at his wife, trying to process what she was telling him. He had no memory of any such fight, any such threats. But he'd been drinking heavily during those years, building the company from nothing, working 18-hour days, and coming home exhausted and angry. Shelby, I would never have taken Josh from you, no matter how angry I was. I know that now. But that night, when he disappeared, she wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. I actually suspected you for weeks, until I realized you were just as destroyed as I was. Before Martin could respond, Josh's voice cut through the tension like a blade. That's a very touching story, Mom, but you're leaving out the best part. They turned to find Josh standing in the kitchen doorway, his face cold and focused. In his hand, he held something that made Martin's blood freeze. A syringe. I found this in the shed, Josh said, his voice deadly calm. Right where I remembered seeing it 10 years ago. Right where you dropped it after you stuck it in my arm. Shelby's face went white. Josh, I don't know what you're talking about. Don't you? Josh stepped into the kitchen, and Martin saw that his son's other hand was behind his back, holding something else. Because I remember now. I remember hiding in the shed, listening to you and Austin Norman planning how to make me disappear. I remember you finding me there. I remember you telling me everything would be okay, right before you drugged me. The name Austin Norman hit Martin like a physical blow. Austin Norman, Shelby's yoga instructor, her trainer, the man she'd claimed was just a friend. I remember waking up in a van. Josh continued, his voice growing stronger with each word. I remember Austin driving, and you in the passenger seat crying. I remember you saying it was the only way, that Martin would never let you go otherwise. Shelby backed against the counter, her eyes darting between Josh and Martin. That's not. You're confused. Traumatic memories aren't reliable. Maybe not, Josh agreed. But this is. He brought his other hand forward, revealing a small digital recorder. I've been wearing this since yesterday. I wanted to see if either of you would slip up, say something that confirmed what I remembered. He looked directly at his mother. You just did. Martin's world tilted on its axis. What did you just confirm? Josh pressed play on the recorder. Shelby's voice filled the kitchen, crystal clear. I know that now. But that night when he disappeared, I actually suspected you for weeks. She said she suspected Dad of taking me. Josh explained calmly. But how could she suspect that if she didn't know I was taken? If she really thought I'd just wandered off, been kidnapped by a stranger, why would her first thought be that Dad was involved? Martin looked at his wife, really looked at her, and saw the truth written in her terrified eyes. Because she knew I'd been taken. She knew because she was the one who took me. Shelby's carefully constructed facade finally cracked. Josh, please. You have to understand. I was desperate. Martin was going to leave me, take you away. I couldn't lose you both. So you decided to fake my death instead? No, it wasn't supposed to happen like that. Austin had a contact in Portland, someone who could give you a new identity, place you with a good family. We were going to send money, make sure you were taken care of. It was supposed to be temporary, just until I could figure out how to get you back legally. Martin felt rage building in his chest like a nuclear reaction. You sold our son? I saved him. Shelby screamed, her composure finally shattering completely. You were going to destroy both of us. You were drinking, gambling, making threats. I was protecting Josh from you by traumatizing him, by drugging him, and selling him to strangers. It wasn't supposed to go wrong. The family in Portland, They were supposed to be temporary guardians. But Austin's contact took the money and disappeared. Josh ended up in the system, and we couldn't find him. Tears were streaming down her face now. I've regretted it every day for 10 years. Josh watched his mother's breakdown with the cold detachment of a scientist observing an experiment. What about Austin? Where is he now? Gone. He left Seattle right after. I haven't seen him since. But you know where he is. It wasn't a question. Shelby's silence was answer enough. Martin looked at his son, his 18-year-old son who'd been forced to grow up in foster care because of his mother's betrayal, and felt something fundamental break inside him. Josh was watching him expectantly, waiting to see what his father would do with this information. Josh, Martin said quietly, do you want to call the police, or should I? Josh smiled for the first time since coming home, and it was a smile that belonged to Martin Kane's son. Actually, Dad, I have a better idea. Chapter 5. The Son's Inheritance. Martin stared at his son, seeing something in Josh's expression that was both familiar and terrifying. His own capacity for calculated vengeance, refined by years of survival that had stripped away any softness or mercy. What kind of better idea? Martin asked. Josh pulled out a chair and sat down at the kitchen table, gesturing for his father to join him. Shelby remained pressed against the counter, tears still streaming down her face, but neither man paid her any attention. I've had 10 years to think about this moment, Josh said calmly. 10 years of wondering who took me away from my life, my family, my childhood. 10 years of nightmares and therapy and learning to trust people who might betray me at any moment. His voice was steady, almost conversational. When a memory started coming back yesterday, I realized something important. What's that? Revenge is a dish best served cold, but it's even better when it's perfectly legal. Martin felt a surge of pride mixed with concern. His son had inherited his strategic mind, but something about Josh's calm detachment was unsettling. What are you thinking? Josh reached into his jacket and pulled out a manila folder. While I was walking around the neighborhood, I actually drove to a law office downtown, talked to a lawyer about my options. Turns out, when someone kidnaps a child and sells them into human trafficking, which is legally what happened to me, the statute of limitations doesn't apply. Human trafficking? Shelby gasped from across the room. That's right, Mother, Josh said without looking at her. You and Austin transported a minor across state lines for the purpose of illegal adoption. That's federal human trafficking, with a potential sentence of 20 years to life. Martin leaned back in his chair, watching his son with growing admiration. But you said something about keeping this legal. I did, because sending Shelby to prison is just the beginning. Josh opened the folder and spread several documents across the table. You see, Dad, I've been doing some research on Kane construction. Very impressive what you've built. Estimated value of $35 million, with assets including this house, the company headquarters, and about $15 million in liquid investments. Josh, what are you getting at? I'm getting at the fact that under Washington state law, any assets acquired through criminal enterprise can be seized by the state. But here's the interesting part. Assets can also be claimed by victims of the criminal enterprise. Martin began to understand where this was heading, and his admiration for his son's intelligence grew. You want to sue for damages. Not sue. Claim. As the victim of human trafficking, I'm entitled to compensation for my suffering, lost opportunities, medical expenses, and punitive damages. But since Shelby doesn't have any assets in her own name, you'd be claiming against the marital assets. Exactly. Which means you'd lose half of everything you've built, Dad. Unless... Josh smiled that cold smile again. Unless you were to divorce Shelby before the criminal charges are filed and the asset seizure begins. From across the room, Shelby let out a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob. You're both insane. Martin, you can't be seriously considering this. Martin looked at his wife, the woman who'd spent 10 years lying to his face, letting him blame himself for their son's disappearance, letting him drink himself nearly to death with guilt and rage. Then he looked at Josh, who'd survived a decade of trauma and still had the strength and intelligence to fight back. What about Austin? Martin asked. Oh, I have plans for Austin too. Josh's smile widened. See, While I was at the lawyer's office, I also hired a private investigator. Austin Norman isn't as smart as he thinks he is. He's been living in Portland under his real name, working as a fitness trainer at an upscale gym. He's also been running a little side business. What kind of side business? The kind that involves convincing wealthy, unhappy wives to disappear with their children. Apparently, our situation wasn't unique. Austin has a whole network set up, fake documents, safe houses, contacts in other states. He's been at this for 15 years. Martin felt his hands clench into fists. How many children? According to my investigator, at least 12 that we can prove. Maybe more. Josh's voice remained eerily calm. But here's the beautiful part, Dad. Austin made one critical mistake. What's that? He kept records. Financial records, client lists, even photos. He's been blackmailing some of his former clients, threatening to expose their locations if they don't keep paying him. Josh pulled out another document. My investigator managed to get copies of some of those records. Austin has been systematically destroying families for over a decade, and we have the evidence to prove it. Shelby had slid down the cabinet to sit on the floor, her face buried in her hands. "Oh God," she whispered. "Oh God, what have I done?" "You've committed multiple felonies," Josh said matter-of-factly. "But don't worry, Mother. I'm not completely heartless. When you testify against Austin and help us shut down his operation, I'll make sure the prosecutor knows you cooperated." Martin studied his son's face, looking for some sign of the boy he'd raised. What he saw instead was someone who'd been forged in fire, hardened by betrayal, and shaped into something that could be either a powerful ally or a dangerous enemy. "What do you need from me?" Martin asked. "File for divorce. Tomorrow. Cite irreconcilable differences. We'll add adultery later when it becomes relevant. Transfer all marital assets to a trust with me as the beneficiary. Then we call Detective Morrison and turn over everything we've gathered." "And Shelby?" Josh finally looked at his mother, and for just a moment, Martin saw a flicker of the hurt child Josh had once been. "Shelby will do exactly what Austin's other victims have been doing for years. She'll disappear." "What do you mean?" "I mean, she'll take the new identity Austin creates for her, and she'll vanish. No criminal charges, no prison time, no asset seizure. She gets to start over somewhere far away from here, with nothing but whatever money she can carry." Shelby looked up from the floor, hope flickering in her eyes. "Josh, you do that? You let me go?" "I do that," Josh confirmed. "On one condition." "What condition?" Josh's smile returned, colder than ever. "You have to live with what you've done for the rest of your life. You have to wake up every morning knowing that you destroyed your own family. You have to go to sleep every night knowing that you're a child trafficker who sold her own son." His voice dropped to a whisper. "And you have to do it knowing that if you ever try to contact me or Dad again, I'll make sure you spend the rest of your life in federal prison." Chapter 6. The Web Titans. Detective Morrison arrived within the hour, accompanied by 2 federal agents and a prosecutor from the U.S. Attorney's Office. Josh had prepared for their arrival with the thoroughness of a military strategist, laying out documents, recordings, and photographs across the dining room table like evidence in a war room. Shelby sat at one end of the table, her face pale and drawn, while Martin and Josh flanked her on either side. The federal agents, Special Agent Christina Arroyo and Special Agent Walter Olson, studied the evidence with professional interest. "Mrs. Kane," Agent Arroyo began, "before we start, I need to advise you of your rights. You have the right to remain silent." "She'll cooperate," Josh interrupted smoothly. "Won't you, Mother?" Shelby nodded miserably. "I'll tell you everything." What followed was 3 hours of detailed confession. Shelby described her affair with Austin Norman, her desperation when Martin had threatened divorce, and Austin's proposal to solve her problems by making Josh disappear temporarily. She provided names, dates, locations, and financial records with the mechanical precision of someone who knew her life was over. "Austin has a house in Portland," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. 1247 Elm Street. He keeps all his client files in a safe in the basement. The combination is Josh's birthday, August 15th. Josh made a note of the address, his expression unchanged. "How many other families, Shelby?" "I don't know exactly. Austin said I was his 15th client. But some of them were just relocations, women fleeing abusive husbands, that sort of thing. The child cases. She swallowed hard. Maybe 6 or 7. Agent Olson leaned forward. Did Austin ever mention what happened to the children who didn't work out? The ones who couldn't be placed with families. Shelby's face went even paler. There was a couple in Nevada. The Zimmermans. Austin said they took the problem cases, the ones who were too traumatized or difficult to place elsewhere. Took them how? I don't know. I didn't want to know. Tears started flowing again. I just wanted my son safe. I thought if I didn't ask questions. Martin felt sick. His son could have ended up with the Zimmermans, whoever they were. The fact that Josh had somehow escaped that fate was either a miracle or a testament to his own strength and intelligence. We'll need you to wear a wire, Agent Arroyo said. Call Austin, arrange a meeting. We need him to confirm these details on tape. He won't meet with me, Shelby protested. We haven't spoken in 10 years. If I call out of the blue. Tell him Josh is back, Josh suggested calmly. Tell him you need help disappearing again because Josh remembers everything. Agent Arroyo nodded approvingly. That could work. You want to know what Josh remembers, how much danger he's in. When? Shelby asked. Tonight, Josh said firmly. Every day we wait is another day for Austin to disappear or destroy evidence. The agent spent the next hour preparing Shelby for the call, coaching her on what to say and how to react. Josh watched the proceedings with the detached interest of someone watching a chess game, which Martin realized was exactly what this was to his son. At 8 p.m., Shelby made the call from the living room while everyone else listened from the kitchen through federal surveillance equipment. Austin, it's Shelby Kane. Her voice was steady, professional. I need to see you. It's about Josh. Austin's voice came through the speakers, older but still recognizable. Shelby? Jesus, I haven't heard from you in. What about Josh? He's back. The police found him. He's living with us again. A long pause. Does he remember? Some things? Fragments. But Austin, he's asking questions. About the shed, about that night. I think he's starting to piece things together. Shit. Okay. Where do you want to meet? Not over the phone. Can you come to Seattle? Are you insane? If he remembers me. He doesn't. But Austin, I'm scared. If he figures out what really happened, if he goes to the police. All right. Give me 24 hours. I'll drive up. Where can we meet that's safe? Shelby looked toward the kitchen, and Josh nodded. The Marriott downtown. Get a room under the name you used in Portland, David Walsh. I'll meet you there tomorrow night. Shelby, if this is some kind of setup. It's not. I'm just scared, Austin. I need to know what to do if Josh remembers everything. After hanging up, Shelby collapsed back in her chair, exhausted. He'll come, but he's suspicious. He should be, Josh said. But greed will override caution. He'll want to know how much danger he's in, and he'll want to make sure you can't testify against him. Agent Arroyo smiled grimly, which means he'll probably try to kill you. The casual way she said it made Shelby gasp. What? Standard operating procedure for someone in Austin's position, Agent Olson explained. You're a liability now. The smart play would be to eliminate you and disappear. But we'll be ready for that, Josh added calmly. Won't we, agents? The next 24 hours passed in a blur of preparation. Federal agents set up surveillance equipment in the hotel room next to Austin's. Martin's divorce attorney filed papers citing irreconcilable differences and requesting an emergency asset freeze. Josh met with victim services coordinators to begin the process of claiming damages. Throughout it all, Josh remained calm and focused, orchestrating events with the precision of a conductor leading a symphony. Martin watched his son work and felt a mixture of pride and unease. Josh's intelligence and strategic thinking were undeniable, but there was something cold about his efficiency that troubled Martin. You're enjoying this, Martin observed as they sat in his study that evening, reviewing the next day's plans. The kitchen fell silent except for the sound of Shelby's quiet sobs. Martin looked at his son, his brilliant, damaged, ruthless son, and realized that Josh had crafted a revenge more complete and devastating than anything Martin could have imagined. Shelby would lose everything, her family, her home, her identity, her future. She'd spend the rest of her life as a ghost, knowing that her own child had been the architect of her downfall. Austin would face justice for his crimes, probably spending the rest of his life in prison. The other families would be reunited or at least given closure. And Martin would get his son back while keeping the empire he'd built. It was brilliant. It was ruthless. It was perfectly legal. It was exactly what Martin Kane would have done if he'd been smart enough to think of it. "When do we start?" Martin asked. Josh pulled out his phone and speed-dialed number. "Hello, Detective Morrison. It's Josh Kane. I think you're going to want to hear what my mother has to tell you about Austin Norman." Josh looked up from the federal briefing documents he'd been studying. "Enjoying what?" "This. The planning, the revenge. You're treating it like a game." "Maybe I am." Josh set down the papers. "Does that bother you?" Martin considered the question carefully. "I don't know. Part of me is proud of how smart you are, how well you're handling this. But part of me worries about what 10 years of survival did to you. It made me strong. It made me careful. It made me someone who doesn't forgive or forget." Josh's voice was matter-of-fact. "Is that such a bad thing?" "It depends on how far you're willing to take it." Josh smiled, that cold, calculating smile that was becoming familiar. "As far as necessary, Dad. Austin Norman destroyed my childhood and ruined other families. Shelby betrayed both of us and let you suffer for 10 years, thinking you'd somehow failed to protect me. They both deserve whatever happens to them. And if Austin tries to hurt Shelby tomorrow night, then he'll have committed attempted murder in front of federal agents. That's life in prison instead of 20 years. Josh shrugged. Either way, he pays for what he did. Martin studied his son's face, looking for some sign of mercy or forgiveness. What he saw instead was someone who'd learned that the world was a cruel place where the strong survive by being more ruthless than their enemies. It should have worried him more than it did. Instead, Martin found himself thinking that Josh Kane was exactly the kind of son a man like him deserved. Chapter 7. The Perfect Trap. The Marriott's fourth floor had been transformed into a federal command center. 3 hotel rooms were occupied by surveillance teams, while the hallway was monitored by agents posing as maintenance workers. Martin and Josh waited in a room 2 doors down from where Austin would meet Shelby, watching multiple video feeds on laptop screens. Target acquired. Agent Arroyo's voice crackled through their earpieces. Male, approximately 45, 6 feet tall, athletic build, moving toward the elevator. Martin watched the lobby feed as Austin Norman entered the hotel. The man looked older, his sandy hair showing gray at the temples, but he moved with the confident stride of someone used to being in control. He wore an expensive suit and carried a leather briefcase, the picture of a successful businessman rather than a child trafficker. "He's carrying," Agent Olson observed from his position in the stairwell. "Shoulder holster, left side." Josh leaned forward, studying Austin's image with predatory intensity. "He came armed. That's premeditation. For self-defense or murder?" Martin asked. "We'll find out soon enough." On the screen, they watched Austin exit the elevator on the 4th floor and walk confidently to room 412. He knocked 3 times, a predetermined signal. "Audio check," Agent Arroyo whispered into her radio. Shelby's voice came through clearly as she opened the door. "Austin, you look good. You look terrible. This whole thing has you spooked, doesn't it?" They entered the room, and the video feed switched to the hidden cameras Agent Arroyo had installed earlier. Austin set his briefcase on the bed and looked around carefully, checking for surveillance equipment with the practiced eye of someone who'd done this before. "So tell me about Josh," Austin said, sitting in the room's single chair. "How much does he remember?" Shelby sat on the edge of the bed, her body language perfectly conveying fear and desperation. "He found the syringe in the shed. He knows I drugged him, and he's been asking about you about that night." "What kind of questions?" "He wants to know where you are, if we're still in contact." "He's smart, Austin. Smarter than we gave him credit for when he was 8. Austin nodded thoughtfully. Smart kids are always the most dangerous. They remember things, make connections. He paused. What does Martin know? Nothing yet. But if Josh tells him, Martin will want blood, Austin finished. And he has the resources to make our lives very difficult. In the surveillance room, Martin clenched his fists. Even now, Austin spoke about Josh like he was a problem to be solved rather than a human being they traumatized. I've been thinking, Austin continued, maybe it's time for you to disappear again. I still have contacts, safe houses. We could set you up somewhere Austin Norman and Shelby Kane never existed. What about Josh? What if he goes to the police? What proof does he have? The memories of an 8-year-old who was traumatized? No prosecutor would touch that case. Josh smiled coldly at the monitor. He's wrong about that. On screen, Austin opened his briefcase and pulled out a manila folder. I brought you some options. New identities, locations, financial arrangements. But Shelby, there's a price. What kind of price? Austin's demeanor changed subtly, becoming more businesslike and much more dangerous. Josh is a loose end. As long as he's alive and talking, we're both at risk. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that smart kids who ask too many questions sometimes have accidents. Car crashes, drowning incidents, drug overdoses. It happens all the time. The room fell silent except for the sound of Shelby's sharp intake of breath. Even knowing this was coming, hearing Austin calmly discuss murdering Josh hit Martin like a physical blow. You want me to kill my own son? I want you to solve our problem permanently. Austin's voice was matter of fact. Look, I know it's difficult, but Josh isn't really your son anymore, is he? 10 years in the system changed him. He's probably dangerous, unstable. You'd be doing everyone a favor. Josh's laugh was soft and cold. Perfect. Conspiracy to commit murder, recorded in high definition. On screen, Shelby was shaking her head. I can't do that, Austin. I won't. Then I'll do it myself. Austin reached into his jacket and pulled out a pistol. Tonight, while he sleeps. Make it look like a break-in gone wrong. Martin will be devastated, but he'll never suspect you. You're insane. I'm practical. Josh is the only witness who can connect us to what happened 10 years ago. Remove Josh, and we're both safe. Agent Arroyo's voice cut through their earpieces. That's enough. Moving in. Everything happened very quickly after that. Federal agents burst through the hotel room door just as Austin was explaining his plan to kill Josh and frame it as a home invasion. Austin reached for his weapon, but found himself facing 4 armed federal agents who were decidedly less interested in his survival than his surrender. Federal agents. Drop the weapon. Austin's gun hit the floor with a metallic clatter, followed immediately by Austin himself as Agent Olson's taser dropped him to the carpet. Austin Norman, Agent Arroyo said as she cuffed him, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder, human trafficking, kidnapping, and about 15 other federal charges we'll discuss later. In a surveillance room, Josh watched Austin's arrest with satisfaction. Phase 1 complete. Phase 1, Martin asked. Austin was just the beginning, Dad. Now we go after his entire network. The briefcase Austin had brought contained exactly what Josh had hoped for. Detailed records of his trafficking operation spanning 15 years. Client lists, financial records, photographs, even video recordings of some transactions. It was a treasure trove of evidence that would destroy dozens of lives and reunite families that had been separated for years. But as Martin watched his son study the evidence with cold efficiency, he realized that Josh's plans went far beyond simple justice. This was about power. The power to decide who lived and who died, who prospered and who suffered. Austin Norman was just the first domino to fall, and Josh Kane was planning to topple them all. Chapter 8. The Network Falls. The Portland field office of the FBI had been transformed into a war room. Maps covered the walls, marked with red pins indicating Austin Norman's network of contacts across 12 states. Josh sat at the center of it all like a spider in a web, connecting dots that federal agents had missed for years. The Zimmermans aren't just placement contacts, Josh explained to the assembled task force. They're running a private adoption mill. Look at the financial records. They've received over $2 million in the past 5 years for placing difficult children. Agent Arroyo studied the documents Josh had highlighted. Difficult how? Traumatized kids who can't be easily placed with legitimate families. Kids who've been so damaged they can't testify about what happened to them. Josh's voice was clinical, detached. Austin sends them the broken ones. and the Zimmermans sell them to people who don't ask questions about paperwork. The implications hit the room like a physical force. They weren't just dealing with a custody dispute gone wrong. They were looking at a systematic child trafficking operation that had been running for over a decade. How many children? Detective Morrison asked quietly. Josh consulted Austin's records. 43 confirmed transactions. Maybe more if Austin kept separate books. Martin watched his son coordinate the federal investigation with unnerving competence. In 3 days, Josh had become the focal point of the largest child trafficking bust in Pacific Northwest history. Federal agents deferred to his insights. Prosecutors consulted him on legal strategy, and victims' families called him personally to thank him for finding their children. But success hadn't softened Josh's edges. If anything, the adulation seemed to feed something cold and calculating in his nature. "What about Shelby?" Martin asked as they drove home from the Portland field office. "What about her?" "She cooperated. She helped us catch Austin. Doesn't that count for something?" Josh glanced at his father with those unsettling green eyes. "She cooperated because she had no choice. She helped because it was her only chance to avoid prison. That doesn't erase what she did to me, Dad. It doesn't give her back the childhood she stole. So, she still disappears. She still disappears. Tomorrow night, as planned." Martin had almost forgotten about that part of Josh's scheme. While the federal investigation unfolded, Josh had been quietly implementing the rest of his revenge. Divorce papers had been filed and served. Marital assets had been frozen, pending the outcome of criminal proceedings. And Shelby had been given an ultimatum: disappear voluntarily or face prosecution as a co-conspirator in Austin's trafficking network. Where will she go? Austin had safe house contacts in Mexico, Costa Rica, and several other non-extradition countries. She can choose whichever one appeals to her. Josh's tone suggested he didn't much care which option she selected. That evening, the Kane family had their last dinner together. Shelby sat at the table like a ghost, picking at food she couldn't taste while Martin and Josh discussed business matters. The normalcy of it was surreal. A family dinner where one member was about to vanish forever and the other two were treating it like a routine evening. "I've been thinking," Shelby said suddenly, her voice barely above a whisper. Both men looked at her, waiting. "Maybe this is for the best. Maybe you're both better off without me." "We are," Josh said matter-of-factly. The blunt cruelty of his response made Martin wince, but he didn't contradict his son. After 10 years of mourning a kidnapped child, he discovered that his wife had been the kidnapper. After 10 years of guilt and self-blame, he'd learned that his son's disappearance had been a calculated betrayal by the person he'd trusted most. Josh was right. They were better off without her. "I want you to know," Shelby continued, tears streaming down her face, "that I never meant for things to go so wrong. I thought I was protecting you, Josh. I thought if Martin took you away from me." "You thought wrong," Josh interrupted. "About everything. About Dad, about me, about what was best for our family. And now you get to live with those mistakes for the rest of your life." After dinner, Shelby went upstairs to pack a single suitcase, all she would be allowed to take. Martin and Josh sat in the study, reviewing final arrangements. "The new identity documents will be ready tomorrow," Josh reported. Elena Rodriguez, born in San Antonio, graduated from UT Austin with a degree in elementary education. Clean background, no criminal record, no family connections. "How did you arrange all this so quickly?" Josh smiled that cold smile. "Austin's network works both ways, Dad. The same contacts who helped him disappear families can help us disappear Shelby. Poetic justice. And the money? $50,000 in cash. Enough to start over. Not enough to live comfortably. She'll have to work for the rest of her life, probably as a waitress or cleaning lady. No more yoga classes, no more spa days, no more credit cards." Martin studied his son's face, looking for some sign of mercy or regret. What he saw instead was satisfaction, the satisfaction of a job well done. "Do you ever wonder if we're being too harsh?" "No." Josh's response was immediate and uncompromising. "She destroyed our family, Dad. She sold me to strangers and let you suffer for 10 years, believing you'd failed to protect me. She doesn't deserve mercy. She's still your mother. No, she's not. Mothers protect their children. Mothers don't drug them and sell them to human traffickers. Josh leaned forward, his eyes intense. DNA doesn't make someone family, Dad. Loyalty does. Trust does. Love does. Shelby chose Austin Norman over her own family. She chose money and convenience over her son's safety. She's not my mother anymore. She's just a criminal who happened to give birth to me. The next morning, Shelby Kane became Elena Rodriguez in a brief ceremony at a document forger's office that the FBI had overlooked during their raids. Josh watched his former mother sign her new identity papers with the same detached interest he'd shown during Austin's arrest. The car is waiting outside, he told her. Your contact in Costa Rica expects you Tuesday. The house is small but clean, and there's a job waiting at a local restaurant. Shelby, Elena, nodded mutely. She'd said her goodbyes the night before, though they'd been more like apologies. Neither Martin nor Josh had responded. Josh, she said as she picked up her suitcase. If you ever want to find me, I won't. The finality of his response seemed to break something inside her. She looked at Martin one last time, perhaps hoping for some sign of forgiveness or regret. Martin's expression remained stone cold. Goodbye, Shelby. After she left, father and son stood at the living room window, watching the car disappear down the driveway. They didn't speak for several minutes. Do you think we'll ever see her again? Martin finally asked. I hope not, Josh replied. But if we do, it'll be because she's made another mistake. And I won't be as merciful next time. Martin believed him. His son had orchestrated the complete destruction of Austin Norman's trafficking network, reunited dozens of families, and eliminated the woman who'd betrayed them both. Josh had done it all legally, systematically, and without a single moment of apparent doubt or regret. Martin Kane had raised his son to be strong, but 10 years of survival had made Josh into something else entirely, something that could be incredibly dangerous to anyone who crossed the Kane family. Looking at his son's profile in the window reflection, Martin realized he was perfectly fine with that. Chapter 9. Legacy of Steel. 6 months later, Martin Kane stood in the executive conference room of Kane Construction, watching his son present quarterly financial reports to the board of directors. At 19, Josh had officially joined the company as vice president of operations, though his real role was something closer to enforcer and strategic planner. The transformation had been remarkable. Josh had used his celebrity status as the victim who'd brought down a major trafficking network to build connections throughout law enforcement, politics, and business. Kane Construction now had government contracts worth $50 million, and their private security division, Josh's Innovation, was already turning a profit. The Victim Services Foundation is exceeding projections, Josh reported to the board. We've reunited 41 families in the past 6 months, and our partnerships with federal agencies have generated substantial goodwill and business opportunities. Board member Edmund McGraw, a silver-haired banker who'd known Martin for 20 years, nodded approvingly. Outstanding work, Josh. The foundation is not only doing important humanitarian work, but it's also excellent for our corporate image. After the meeting, Martin and Josh walked through the construction company's main facility, watching crews prepare for the next day's projects. Workers nodded respectfully as they passed, and Martin noticed how they looked at Josh, with the same mixture of respect and wariness they'd once reserved for him alone. Any word from Costa Rica? Martin asked quietly. She's still alive, still working at that restaurant. No attempt to contact us or return to the States. Josh's tone suggested he considered this a minor disappointment rather than a relief. In Austin, sentenced to life without parole yesterday. Federal judge threw the book at him. Murder conspiracy, trafficking, racketeering, the works. Josh smiled with satisfaction. He'll die in prison. They paused beside a bulletin board covered with newspaper clippings about the trafficking bust. Josh's photo appeared in several of them, usually alongside headlines like Brave Victim Brings Down Child Trafficking Ring and Teen Hero Saves Dozens of Families. You've become quite the celebrity, Martin observed. Celebrity is useful. It opens doors, creates opportunities, makes people want to help you. Josh studied his own image in the news clippings. But it's also temporary. Eventually, people will move on to the next story, the next hero. Real power comes from building something that lasts. Is that what we're doing? Building power. Josh turned to face his father directly. We're building a legacy, Dad. Kane Construction was your foundation, but it was just the beginning. The security division, the victim services foundation, the political connections. Those are the tools we'll use to become truly untouchable. Martin felt a chill run down his spine. His son spoke about power with the casual familiarity of someone who'd been planning its acquisition for years. Untouchable from what? From people like Austin Norman. From people like the old Shelby Kane. From anyone who thinks they can hurt our family and walk away unscathed. Josh's voice was calm, reasonable, terrifying. You built an empire, Dad, but you built it on construction and concrete. I'm building ours on information, connections, and fear. Fear. Austin Norman is serving life in prison. His entire network has been destroyed, with dozens of people facing federal charges. The families who bought children from him are being investigated and prosecuted. Everyone connected to that operation has lost everything. Josh paused. And everyone in our industry, in law enforcement, in politics, knows that Josh Kane was responsible for bringing them down. Martin began to understand. His son wasn't just seeking justice. He was establishing a reputation. Anyone who might consider crossing the Kane family now had a very clear example of what happened to people who hurt them. You're building a deterrent. I'm building a dynasty. The kind where people think very carefully before they decide to betray us, steal from us, or threaten our interests. Josh gestured toward the construction crews around them. These people work for us because we pay well and treat them fairly. But they also work for us because they know what happens to people who cross us. They walked outside to the parking lot, where Josh's new car, a black BMW M8, sat beside Martin's truck. The contrast was symbolic. Martin's practical, working man's vehicle next to his son's sleek machine designed for speed and intimidation. There's something else, Josh said as they reached their cars. I've been thinking about expanding our operations. How so? There are other Austin Normans out there. Other trafficking networks, other corrupt officials, other people who prey on families like ours used to be. Josh's expression was thoughtful, calculating. What if Kane Construction's security division specialized in finding them? Like a private investigation firm? Like a private army? Ex-military, ex-law enforcement, people with the skills and resources to track down criminals that traditional law enforcement can't touch. Josh leaned against his car. We already have the federal connections, the media credibility, the financial resources. We could become the go-to solution for families dealing with kidnapping, trafficking, extortion, any crime where the victims need someone with our particular skill set. Martin considered the proposal. It was brilliant in its scope and terrifying in its implications. Josh was proposing to turn their personal revenge into a business model. That's a lot of power for one family to wield. It's exactly the right amount of power for our family to wield. Josh's smile was sharp as a blade. We've proven we can destroy our enemies completely and legally. We've proven we can work with federal agencies and media organizations. We've proven we never forget and never forgive those who betray us. And if someone decides we've become too powerful, if they try to stop us, Josh's smile widened. Then they'll learn the same lesson Austin Norman and Shelby Kane learned. Cross the Kane family, and you lose everything. As Martin drove home that evening, he reflected on what his son had become. Josh was brilliant, ruthless, and completely without mercy when it came to protecting their family. He'd turned personal trauma into public heroism, used legal channels to destroy his enemies, and transformed their construction company into the foundation of something much larger and more dangerous. Most fathers would be concerned about such calculating coldness in their 19-year-old son. Martin Kane was proud. That night, he sat in his study looking at the photo of 8-year-old Josh that still sat on his desk. The gap-toothed boy in the picture had been innocent, trusting, vulnerable. The man Josh had become was none of those things. But he was alive. He was brilliant. He was family. And he was exactly the kind of son Martin Kane deserved. Someone who understood that in a world full of predators, The only way to protect what you love is to become the most dangerous predator of all. The phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. Josh's voice came through clearly. Dad, I just got a call from family in Sacramento. Their 12-year-old daughter was kidnapped 3 days ago. Local police aren't making progress. They want to hire us. Martin looked at the photo of his lost son one more time, then set it aside. Tell them we'll take the case. Because this was what they were now, protectors of families, destroyers of those who preyed on the innocent, and keepers of a legacy built on the principle that crossing the Kane family came with a price that few could afford to pay. The boy in the photo was gone forever. The man who'd replaced him was exactly who he needed to be.
This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. That would help me a lot. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.